At 16, I thought the scariest thing about high school was failing math. I never imagined the real danger would come from the person paid to protect us, a teacher who should have been in jail for what they did. And the worst part? It almost cost me my life. My name is Natalie, and when I first stepped into Mr. Carson's biology class, I thought I'd lucked out with one of the good teachers. He had a reputation for being passionate, energetic, and, according to my friends, just strict enough to keep us on our toes. He was in his early 40s, tall with salt and pepper hair, the kind of teacher who leaned on the edge of your desk while he explained a concept, making you feel like you were the only person in the room. Science isn't about memorization, he'd say, pointing a piece of chalk like a conductor's baton. It's about survival. Understanding life is the difference between living and dying. His words always carried weight, as if he knew something the rest of US didn't. At first, I admired him. He remembered details about students' lives, who played sports, who loved art, whose parents worked late. When I got a B+ on the first quiz, he wrote in the margin, "You're smarter than you think. Push harder." It was the first time a teacher hadn't written me off as average. But there were cracks, even then. Small, subtle moments that didn't fully register until later. One of the biggest parts of my life, something Carson absolutely knew, was my severe peanut allergy. My mom had drilled it into every teacher, every coach, every adult who ever supervised me. If Natalie eats peanuts, she could die. She always carries her EpiPen. Always. I'd lived with it forever. To me, it wasn't just a condition. It was my reality. The school even had a policy. No peanuts in classrooms, period. It was that serious. At the start of the semester, Carson had nodded along politely during the health form review. Got it. Peanut allergy. EpiPen. No problem, he said, tapping the paper with his pen. His tone was casual, but I assumed it meant he understood. In those early weeks, he actually seemed supportive. He made jokes about how Natalie has the fastest reflexes in the room whenever I bolted upright at the smell of peanut butter, and once he even moved a snack from another student's desk, saying, "We're not *ling my best biology student on my watch." Everyone laughed, including me. But there was something about the way he said best biology student, like it wasn't entirely a joke. Like he enjoyed having power over whether or not I felt safe. At first, it didn't bother me. Carson had a flair for drama, and plenty of teachers had quirks. Compared to others who barely knew my name, he felt involved. I didn't see that involvement for what it really was, control. Around mid-semester, my friends and I had fallen into a routine of hanging out in his classroom before first period. Carson encouraged it. He said it made the room feel alive. He'd bring donuts or breakfast bars sometimes, and the others thought it was awesome. But I always had to check the ingredients carefully, because I couldn't risk even the smallest trace of peanuts. He'd watch me read the labels with this amused expression, like he thought I was being overly dramatic. One morning, I remember him saying, "Natalie, if the world really ended tomorrow, do you think people would read ingredient labels? You'd have to toughen up, learn to adapt." I forced a laugh, but his words unsettled me. Why joke about something that could literally *LL me? Still, I brushed it off. False stability is like that. You ignore the warning bells because you want so badly to believe everything's okay. Outside of those strange moments, Carson played the part of the perfect teacher. He stayed late after school to help kids prep for exams, wrote glowing recommendations for college apps, and even organized a field trip to a local research lab. Parents praised him at PTA meetings. The administration treated him like a golden boy. And me. I kept ignoring the unease in my stomach. Because when someone is respected, admired, even loved by everyone around you, it's hard to convince yourself that you might be the only one seeing the cracks. The cracks were there. I just didn't want to admit it. That's why, when the first Rayall warning bell rang, I wasn't ready for it. I still believed Mr. Carson was the kind of teacher who pushed students to grow. Not the kind of teacher who'd push someone straight toward danger. The first warning bell didn't come with sirens or flashing lights. It came with a granola bar. It was late October, the kind of cold, gray morning when everyone trudged into class half asleep. Mr. Carson had placed a box of protein bars on his desk, a gift to his students for working hard. He waved his hand like a game show host. Take one, fuel your brain. Biology is energy, people. Everyone laughed, and a few kids swarmed the box. I stayed back as always, scanning the wrappers for peanut warnings. My habit was so ingrained it barely registered anymore. That's when Carson called across the room, "Natalie, don't be shy. You need this more than anyone." I froze, eyes flicking to the box. He knew. He knew my allergy. I forced a polite smile. "I'm good, thanks." He tilted his head, that amused smirk tugging at his lips. "Come on. Don't tell me you're afraid of a granola bar." The room chuckled. My face burned. "It's not fear," I said tightly. "It's common sense." Carson walked over, plucked a bar from the box, and held it out. Lesson of the day. Biology doesn't bend to your comfort zone. Real life means adapting. If you can't handle this, he trailed off deliberately, letting the implication hang. My heart pounded. Everyone's eyes were on me. "I can't eat that," I said, sharper this time. He held my gaze for a moment, then chuckled and dropped the bar back in the box. "Fine. Lesson postponed." The class laughed nervously and turned back to their seats, but I couldn't shake the unease. It hadn't been a joke. It was a test. That day at lunch, I sat with my friend Dana, replaying the moment in my head. "He's just being dramatic, right?" I asked. Dana frowned. "Maybe, but he's not supposed to do that. He knows your allergy isn't a game." I nodded, but the pit in my stomach wouldn't leave. The second bell came a week later. We were running a lab with different food samples, testing for starch, protein, and fat content. Carson divided us into groups and handed out small containers. My group sample was peanut butter. I pushed it back instantly. "I can't touch this," I said, panicked. He raised an eyebrow. "You're not eating it. Just testing. You'll be fine." The other students shifted uncomfortably. Dana whispered, "She really can't, Mr. Carson." He waved dismissively. Science isn't about comfort zones. If Natalie can't handle one tiny sample in a controlled setting, how will she handle the real world? My throat tightened. My hands shook as I grabbed a napkin and shoved the container away. "I told you, I can't." The room was silent, waiting for him to back down. Finally, he sighed exaggeratedly. "Fine. Someone else do it. But Natalie, biology won't make exceptions for you." The words stung deeper than I wanted to admit. For the rest of class, I sat in silence, trying to ignore the humiliation clawing at me. That night, I told my mom. Her face went pale. "He made you handle what?" she demanded. "Not handle. Just, he wanted me to," I said quickly, not wanting to make it sound worse. She shook her head furiously. "This is unacceptable. I'm calling the school." I begged her not to. "Please, Mom. If you make it a big deal, he'll know I complained. He's respected. No one will believe me." She stared at me, torn. "Natalie, I'll handle it," I insisted, even though I had no idea how. Because deep down, I already knew, Mr. Carson wasn't just careless. He was pushing, testing boundaries, seeing how far he could go before someone broke. And I had the sickening feeling I was the experiment. After the peanut butter lab, everything shifted. It was subtle at first, like shadows creeping longer across the floor, but soon it became undeniable. Mr. Carson wasn't just teaching science anymore. He was testing me. And the worst part was how he made it seem like I was the problem. It started with comments. "Natalie, you really shouldn't live in a bubble." Or, "What happens if you go to college and someone makes a mistake in the dining hall? You'll just die." The other students would laugh awkwardly, not because they thought it was funny, but because when a teacher sets the tone, you follow it. I felt smaller each time, more exposed. Then he escalated point one morning. I opened my locker to find a Reese's wrapper taped inside. No note, just the empty wrapper. My hands shook as I peeled it off with a tissue, heart racing. Who had done it? A prank from another student, or from Carson himself? When I showed Dana, she looked horrified. "Tell the principal," she urged. But I couldn't. Because what if it wasn't Carson? What if it was just some kid messing around? Without proof, I'd look paranoid. And if it was him, going to the principal without evidence could make him even more dangerous. So I stayed quiet. That silence gave him room to grow bolder. During one lab, he insisted I sit next to a student eating trail mix. "Exposure builds resilience," he said smoothly, as if quoting a textbook. I sat rigid, every breath shallow, praying none of the dust landed near me. When I complained, he smiled thinly. "Biology doesn't bend for anyone, Natalie. If you want to survive, you adapt." It wasn't education anymore. It was cruelty disguised as a lesson. And slowly, I began to lose support. Dana tried to stand up for me, but Carson was clever. He called her overly sensitive in front of the class, painting her as dramatic. Soon, she stopped speaking up, afraid of becoming a target too. Other classmates started avoiding me. They didn't want to get dragged into the tension between me and Carson. A few even muttered that I was making it a bigger deal than it was. That isolation ate at me. At home, I tried to tell my mom, but she was exhausted from double shifts. "We'll go to the school board if this keeps up," she said, but her tone was weary, like she doubted it would matter. My dad had left years earlier. There was no one else to lean on. So I bottled it up. But Carson sensed that weakness like blood in the water. One afternoon, during a group presentation, I was explaining our results when he interrupted. "Natalie, imagine you're stranded on an island and the only food is peanuts. What do you do? Starve." The class laughed uncomfortably. My face burned, my throat tight. "That's not realistic," I snapped. "Realistic," he echoed mockingly. "Life isn't fair. Biology doesn't give exemptions." His eyes glittered as if he'd won some unspoken game. That night, I cried in my room, clutching my EpiPen like a lifeline. The isolation was complete. Friends distant, teachers oblivious, my mom too tired to fight. It was just me against him. And Carson knew it. The pressure kept building, day after day. I started dreading school, stomach twisting every morning. The anxiety followed me everywhere, seeping into my sleep, my appetite, my sense of safety. But what I didn't know then was that the real breaking point was still coming. And when it hit, it wouldn't just be about humiliation or int*medation. It would be about survival. The breaking point came on an ordinary Tuesday, in the middle of a lesson that should have been boring and forgettable. Instead, it was the day I realized Mr. Carson wasn't just careless or cruel, he was dangerous in a way that should have landed him in jail. We were doing another food science experiment, this time testing pH levels in various solutions. Vinegar, lemon juice, baking soda water, safe, harmless stuff. At least, that's what I thought. Halfway through the period, Carson walked in with a tray of unlabeled samples. "Surprise round," he announced. "Real science means dealing with the unexpected." He passed them out to each group, grinning like he was proud of himself. My group's cup was covered with foil. When I peeled it back, a nutty smell hit me instantly. My stomach lurched. It was faint but unmistakable. "Mr. Carson," I said quickly, panic rising, "this has peanuts." I can smell it. He raised an eyebrow. Impossible. It's just a protein suspension. No, I insisted, voice shaking. This isn't safe for me. The other students exchanged nervous glances. Dana whispered, Natalie, don't. Carson smirked. Don't what? Learn. Adapt. Come on, Natalie, you can't spend your whole life running from what scares you. I stared at him, realization slamming into me. He knew. He had done this deliberately. Do the test, he ordered. His voice was calm, but underneath it was steel. I backed away, heart racing. I won't. The class went dead silent. Everyone was watching, no one daring to breathe. Carson's smile widened, though his eyes were ice. So you refuse an assignment? Fine. But in the real world, refusal has consequences. He picked up the cup and set it directly in front of me. Adapt or fail. My throat closed in panic. My chest tightened. He wasn't just humiliating me, he was gambling with my life, daring me to prove him wrong. Dana finally spoke up. This is insane. She could die. Are you trying to K*LL her? Carson turned slowly to her, expression sharp. Enough. Sit down. But she didn't. She grabbed the cup and carried it straight to the trash, slamming it in. I'm not letting you do this to her. The class erupted, half the students in shock, the other half whispering furiously. My hands shook as I clutched my EpiPen, ready, terrified. Carson's face twisted, the mask slipping. Weakness, he muttered almost to himself. That's what's wrong with this generation. No resilience. No survival instinct. And that's when it hit me, this wasn't about science. It wasn't even about me. This was about control. About him proving he had the power to decide whether I was safe or not. The revelation was sickening. My teacher, the man entrusted with our education and safety, wasn't just crossing boundaries, he was endangering my life to feed some twisted philosophy. After class, Dana and I sat in the library, both shaking. We have to report him, she said. But fear tangled my words. He's respected. No one will believe us. She gripped my hand. Then we'll make them believe. That night, I told my mom everything. Every granola bar, every comment, every lab, every wrapper. She went pale, then furious. He's not a teacher, he's a criminal, she said. And if the school won't stop him, we will. The revelation changed everything. Carson wasn't just reckless. He was dangerous, calculated, and escalating. And now, for the first time, I knew we couldn't just endure him. We had to fight back. After the peanut experiment, my fear curdled into fury. Mr. Carson had crossed the line from int*medation into attempted harm, and the revelation left me and my mom with no choice. It was time to fight back. The first step was gathering proof. Words alone wouldn't be enough. Carson was too well-liked, too respected by the administration. Without evidence, we'd look like paranoid troublemakers, and he'd keep teaching, keep endangering students. Dana was the first to step up. I'll testify, she said, eyes blazing. I saw what he did. I'll tell anyone who'll listen. Her courage lit a spark in me. Together, we started documenting everything. Notes after each class, detailed logs of his comments, every time he tried to push peanuts near me. Dana even snapped a photo when Carson left one of those protein bar boxes unattended, clearly labeled with peanut ingredients. Meanwhile, my mom went full mama bear. She contacted Jenna, a legal advocate she knew through work. Jenna's advice was blunt. Schools protect their golden teachers at all costs. If you want this to stick, you need to make it public. Evidence, witnesses, pressure. So that became the plan. Expose Carson where he couldn't wiggle out. We started small. Dana leaked an anonymous tip to the school newspaper, suggesting a safety scandal in the biology department. It wasn't enough to name him yet, but it planted the seed. Next, Jenna helped us draft a formal complaint to the district, complete with the evidence we had so far. She warned us that the administration might bury it, but filing it created a paper trail. If they try to cover it up, she said, that's evidence too. But the real counterstrike came when Dana suggested something bolder. What if we expose him during the science fair? She whispered one afternoon. The whole community will be there. Parents, press, administrators. If he tries anything, people will see it for themselves. The idea terrified me, but it also felt right. Carson thrived in shadows, in moments where it was my word against his. If we dragged him into the spotlight, he couldn't hide. The week before the fair, my anxiety was a storm. Carson sensed it. He leaned over my desk one day, his voice low. You've been quiet lately, Natalie. Almost like you're plotting something. Be careful. Secrets have consequences. I forced myself to meet his gaze. So do lies. His smile didn't reach his eyes. We'll see. That night, I tucked my EpiPen in my bag, double-checked Dana's phone recorder, and repeated Jenna's instructions in my head. Stay calm. Document everything. If he endangers you, we act immediately. The stage was set. The science fair buzzed with students showing off posters and models, parents snapping pictures, judges weaving through the exhibits. Carson moved among the booths like a proud general, basking in the attention. He stopped by my station, a genetics project Dana and I had worked on, and smirked. Impressive, he said loudly for the crowd. Then lower so only I heard, don't choke. My pulse spiked. But I forced a steady smile, refusing to give him the satisfaction of fear. The counterstrike wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about exposing him. And soon, he'd give us exactly what we needed. The gymnasium hummed with the noise of parents, judges, and students. The science fair was supposed to be a celebration of achievement, but for me, it felt like stepping into an arena. Carson stalked the aisles like a predator in his territory, his fake smile plastered on for the audience. I knew he'd try something. He couldn't resist the urge to show control. The only question was when. Dana stood beside me, her phone set to record. Every time Carson neared, she squeezed my hand, a reminder that I wasn't alone. My mom lingered nearby with Jenna, blending into the crowd. It was our safety net. If Carson crossed the line, we'd spring the trap. And then, right before the judges reached our booth, Carson made his move. He strode up with a tray of samples for a student demonstration. At first, it looked innocent. Cups of flour, sugar, baking soda. But my stomach dropped when I saw the last container, a jar of peanut butter, lid already unscrewed. The smell wafted out instantly, sharp and suffocating. Carson set it down directly in front of me. "Natalie," he said smoothly, loud enough for the nearby crowd to hear, "since your project is about genetics and adaptation, why don't you demonstrate how people overcome weaknesses?" Gasps rippled through the small audience. Dana whispered, "He didn't." My heart thundered in my ears. "I can't be near that," I said firmly, my voice shaking but audible. Carson leaned in, smile sharp. "Science doesn't care about your feelings. Adapt or admit you can't cut it in the real world." Parents began murmuring. One judge frowned. Dana's recorder caught everything. I stepped back, clutching my EpiPen. "This is dangerous. You know I'm allergic." Carson chuckled, turning to the crowd. "See? This generation can't handle anything. Even biology terrifies them." But this time, the crowd didn't laugh. One parent shouted, "Are you serious? That could K*LL her." Another whispered, "Isn't she the student with the allergy?" The murmurs grew louder, angrier. Dana slammed her hands on the table. "Enough. He's been doing this for months, humiliating her, putting her in danger, using peanuts in class despite knowing her allergy. We have proof." She held up her phone, the recorder still running. Carson's mask cracked. His smile faltered, replaced by rage. "Put that away," he snapped. But Jenna stepped forward, flanked by two administrators she'd pulled aside earlier. "Actually," she said calmly, "keep it rolling." She turned to the crowd. "You all saw what just happened. This isn't a lesson. This is abuse." Carson's face reddened. "This is absurd. She's exaggerating, manipulating you all." But the evidence was undeniable. Dana's recordings, the witnesses in the room, the parents who'd just seen him shove peanut butter in front of me. The principal's face had gone pale. "Mr. Carson," he said stiffly, "please step away from the student." Carson tried one last time, leaning toward me with venom in his eyes. "You think you've won? You think anyone will believe?" But he was cut off as security escorted him out of the gym, parents shouting, cameras flashing. For the first time in months, I felt air rush back into my lungs. My legs shook, but I stayed standing. Dana squeezed my shoulder, whispering, "We got him." The final showdown wasn't dramatic in the way I'd imagined. No explosions, no collapse of his empire. But it was decisive. In front of parents, judges, administrators, and witnesses, Carson had revealed himself for what he truly was. And there was no coming back from that. When security escorted Mr. Carson out of the gym, the buzz of the science fair collapsed into chaos. Parents demanded answers, students whispered in shock, and administrators scrambled to calm the crowd. But for the first time in months, I wasn't the one shrinking in silence. Carson's power had finally shattered, right in front of everyone. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because of fear, but because of the adrenaline crashing through me. For so long, I'd carried the weight alone, convinced no one would ever believe me. But now, dozens of witnesses had seen what he was capable of. Dana's recordings backed up every word. And Jenna assured us the district couldn't sweep this under the rug anymore. Within days, Carson was placed on administrative leave. The school's official letter tried to sound neutral, but the truth spread quickly. Parents of other students came forward with their own stories. Times he pushed too hard, humiliated kids, crossed boundaries. None as extreme as what he'd done to me, but enough to paint a pattern. Then came the district investigation. Mom and I sat in a conference room with officials, laying out everything. The granola bars, the peanut butter lab, the threatening comments. Dana testified, shaking but resolute. Rosa, the librarian who'd noticed Carson's behavior months earlier, added her own concerns. Piece by piece, the portrait became undeniable. Carson's response? Denial. He claimed it was all exaggerated, that I was too sensitive, that Dana was manipulated by loyalty. He even tried to argue that exposing me to peanuts was an educational demonstration. But his calm, confident mask was gone. Without the respect of parents and peers, his words rang hollow. The district expelled him from the school system permanently. But it didn't stop there. Jenna pushed the case to law enforcement, framing it not just as misconduct but as reckless endangerment. "He knew," she told the officers flatly. "He knowingly endangered the life of a minor. That's not just bad teaching. That's criminal." Hearing those words gave me chills. She was right. For months, I'd internalized the idea that maybe I was overreacting, that maybe my fear was weakness. But it wasn't weakness to want to live. It wasn't weakness to demand safety. What Carson had done wasn't a lesson. It was abuse. And abuse had consequences. When the story hit the local paper, the headline read, "Beloved teacher accused of endangering student with allergy." It stung to see beloved in the same sentence as endangering, but the article laid out the truth. My truth. At school, things shifted. Some classmates who'd once avoided me came up to apologize. A few admitted they'd been scared to speak out, worried about grades or reputation. I understood. Fear had kept me silent too. But seeing their faces, realizing they finally believed me, was healing in a way I hadn't expected. For Dana, the aftermath meant recognition. She became known as the girl who stood up to Carson, who threw the peanut cup in the trash. Teachers praised her courage, though she always deflected. It wasn't bravery, she told me quietly. It was just, enough was enough. For my mom, the aftermath meant relief. I'll never forget the night she hugged me tight, whispering, "You saved yourself, and you saved me. I couldn't protect you, but you still made it out." Her guilt weighed heavy, but I reminded her, none of this was her fault. The blame belonged entirely to Carson. And for me, the aftermath meant reclaiming my voice. I started attending advocacy meetings for students with allergies, sharing my story so others knew they weren't overreacting, that their safety mattered. I wrote an essay for the school newsletter titled, "Safety Isn't Optional," and it spread further than I expected. Parents printed it out, teachers pinned it in classrooms. College applications loomed on the horizon, and for the first time, I didn't downplay my experiences. In my personal statement, I wrote about surviving Carson's class, not as a victim, but as someone who refused to be erased. Carson's trial is still pending. Maybe he'll serve time, maybe not. But whether or not he spends a day in jail, his career is over, his mask is gone, and the truth is out. When I look back, the scars remain, the nights of panic, the humiliation, the isolation. But they don't define me anymore. They're reminders. Proof that I endured, that I fought back, that I wasn't alone. Carson thought he could use biology to prove I was weak. Instead, he proved something else entirely, that resilience isn't about eating peanuts to adapt. It's about refusing to let someone else decide if you deserve to be safe. He was the teacher who should have been in jail. And because we fought back, one day soon, he just might be.